Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Megan Dowling, and thank you for tuning in to my Healthy Families Facebook Live video series, where I'm dedicated to bringing you important, research-based, unbiased information to help keep you and your family happy and healthy. So it's babies everywhere, as it usually is around my practice, but especially at home right now as well. My brother and his girlfriend just recently, this weekend, had a new baby girl. And also my good friend had her baby at the same hospital the day after. So they're both little girls, and I am so excited to be an auntie for the first time. And it's going to be really fun to have a new baby in the family again. So today I wanted to talk to you about why it is important to get your baby checked by a chiropractor after birth. This is a very important time to get your baby checked by a chiropractor for a number of different reasons. The first issue that we have when the baby is first born is that they potentially were suffering from intra-uterine constraint while they were in the uterus. And the positioning of the baby can have significant impact on its developing spine. So if the mother's pelvis was out of alignment during pregnancy, or if she didn't see a chiropractor basically during the pregnancy, then it's likely that intrauterine constraint was present. And this means that the fetus was constrained by an abnormally constricted space, which could affect the baby's development of their postural muscles. And these structural misalignments could also have a significant impact on the baby's nervous system as well. And another issue that we have right after birth is, unfortunately, modern birthing procedures themselves create many opportunities for injury to the baby. The standard birth procedures today include very awkward positions for the mother, which can lead to difficulty during delivery and a difficult labor. And the more difficult the labor and delivery is, the more potential there is for injury and trauma to the baby being born. So typically, while we're in labor, we are told to lie on our backs, and unfortunately, this is not the optimal position for birth because our pelvis isn't allowed to open up to its fullest capacity, and this may affect the delivery process, because it could either slow down or require unnecessary force in order to birth the baby. And also, the use of pain medication during delivery affects the natural birthing process and affects the mother's ability to fully participate in the birthing process. It's also well documented that pain medication leads to further operative intervention in labor, which can therefore increase the risk of injury to the infant's spine and nervous system. So even if your baby's born by C-section, this could lead to significant biomechanical issues with the baby. When the baby is not birthed through the vaginal canal, it's deprived of the forces that normally help to shape and align the joints of the skull. And this may lead to overlapping of those cranial sutures or the joints of the skull. And this is important because it can put tension on the meninges, which is like the membrane covering the brain. If we have the misalignment of the sutures, then it's going to put tension on the membrane covering of the brain, which can affect the way that the cerebral spinal fluid moves within the nervous system. And this is also not to mention the fact that the forces being applied to the baby in order to get her out of the pelvic canal during a C-section may be just as traumatic as the forces that are applied to the baby during a vaginal delivery. And I know that this was the case with my daughter when she was born via C-section, because she was lodged so deep in my birth canal that they had to vacuum extract her out. And because of that, she had a huge bruise, a huge hematoma on the back of her head during the first few days because of that vacuum extraction. And she also had significant cervical and cranial misalignment as well, which had I not gotten her adjusted, could have affected her development in many different ways. So what are these injuries typically manifest themselves in newborns? The first thing that comes to mind is definitely infantile colic, which deserves a whole video on its own, and I'm sure we'll get there soon. So definitely colicky issues with the baby, a sign that the baby's in some type of pain. They don't even know really what the problem is with colicky babies, but it generally means that the baby's in some type of pain. So that is always a good reason to get your baby checked by a chiropractor. Another common birth injury is a nerve traction type of injury, which are known as brachial plexus injuries, which can happen during a traumatic birth. And a sign of this is when the baby doesn't want to move its arm on one side versus the other. If you know that the baby has a preference for moving this arm over the other side, it generally means that they could have had some traction within the cervical spine that led to injury of the nerves that innervate that arm. And that type of injury can either be temporary or it can be permanent. So again, another very good reason to get your baby checked by a chiropractor. Another sign to look for is if your baby only wants to nurse on one side. If it prefers to nurse maybe just on the right, that could mean that it has pain or discomfort when it tries to turn to the left. And constipation can also be another sign of nerve interference, and this is usually happening within the lumbar spine. And when your baby gets a little bit older, if he or she is having ear infections, that is also a sign that there is probably some cervical misalignment as well. So even though our babies look perfect the moment they enter this world, it's important to realize that they can be suffering from biomechanical issues and stresses that may be caused by the intra-uterine constraint, or also the trauma that happened during birth. And these types of injuries can prevent their bodies from developing optimally. And even if you don't notice any symptoms, wouldn't it make sense to just get your baby checked by a chiropractor who's trained to identify and remove any impedance in your baby's optimal growth and function, right? So since babies are so new and flexible, it is generally such a simple, gentle fix if there is a problem. And we need to keep in mind that baby adjusting is completely different than adult adjusting. Okay, there's no cracking or popping, and babies generally don't even know that they're getting adjusted. In my experience, most newborns sleep through their first adjustment. So the ultimate goal of treatment is to restore balance to the joints and tissues, just to keep everything as biomechanically even as possible. And taking this tension off the baby from day one can help to allow for normal and optimal growth and development of your baby. So a good rule of thumb of when to get your baby checked by a chiropractor is definitely, number one, right after birth, for all the reasons we just talked about. And then after that, at basically every major milestone. So when your baby starts lifting her head, when she starts crawling and sitting up, when she first learns to stand, and during the initial walking stages as well. Especially then, because we know the baby's, getting up and falling quite a bit, which can lead to significant spinal misalignment. So again, basically at every major milestone, it is a good idea to make sure that your baby's spine and nervous system is functioning at its highest capacity. So I will post that timeline of when to get your baby checked by a chiropractor in the comment section below this video. And I hope you found this video informative. If you have any questions, please post them below. And take care. I will see you next week for another super interesting Healthy Families topic. Bye now.